the future of work for Black women and women of color. Rha Goddess is the entrepreneurial soul coach behind hundreds of breakthrough changemakers, cultural visionaries, and social entrepreneurs, from New York Times bestsellers to multi-million-dollar social enterprises. As the CEO of Move the Crowd, Rha Goddess is galvanizing a movement of 3 million entrepreneurs dedicated to reimagining work as a vehicle for creative expression, financial freedom, and social transformation. She's passionate about creating a whole self approach to entrepreneurship, and her unique methodology has empowered a new generation of conscious entrepreneurs to stay true and get paid and do good. Welcome, Rha Goddess. It's always a pleasure to see you here virtually with us.
Thank you so much for having me. It's my joy to be back, Mariella.
Thank you, thank you. Okay, so Rha will be joined in conversation by Angel, who is a global DEI strategist and trainer at Power to Fly. I will pass the mic to both of you. I've got my notebook ready. Please drop knowledge, and thank you so much for sharing time with us today.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you. Well, Rha, welcome. It's so good to have you back at one of our events to share your expertise and vision with us on Black and non-Black women of color in the workplace. You recently published, a report on some startling statistics about the realities of women of color that they face in the workplace. Could you share with us the premise of the report and some key findings?
Yes, absolutely, Angela. And again, thank you all so much for having me. So the report that we published, and it's important to say that I'm also, in addition to being the founder of Move the Crowd, I'm also the proud co-founder and co-CEO of nFormation, which is a member-based community for women of color and professional women of color. So the report that we released back in November was called Pow Her Redefined. And Deepa, my partner, and I felt that it was really important as we were seeing all of the studies come out, particularly post-pandemic, or I should say in the midst of the pandemic, around women of color and their work relationships and the reality of what was happening for women of color in the workplace. We recognized that we were being spoken about in the third person and felt it was really important to do something in our own voice, to give women of color an opportunity to speak for themselves. And so through this research, we surveyed over 1,800 women from all backgrounds around their work experience. And what we found was really incredibly, I would say it's interesting because I think Deepa and I felt like it was very much consistent with the stories and the voices of all of the women of color that we serve and engage with on a day-to-day basis. However, I do think that this opportunity to have the data to reinforce the anecdotals was really where Power Redefined, I think, just affirmed and strengthened everything that we saw. So one of the big statistics that, again, I think we knew this, but it was something else to see it in black and white, is that 70% of women of color feel like they have to prove themselves over and over and over and over and over again. And when we looked at the data, 46% of women of color, and only 46% of women of color, felt like their companies had even created any kind of plan for their retainment or their advancement. So that's less than 50% of all women of color felt that there was a plan in place for them, or even that there was a desire to really see them advance and succeed. One of the other major pieces of data that was, I think, shocking for us as well was that 54% of women felt that they were being undermined by other women. And this is something that we don't talk about enough. And, one of the sort of greatest drop the mic moments in the research was a woman said, we are competing with other women for one chair at the table, and it's a broke ass chair at that, and I think there's a way in which we have normalized this expectation that the door is only going to be open that much, that there's only going to be one seat or one opportunity. And I think that consciously or subconsciously, we don't necessarily support each other maybe in the ways that we could in the workplace. As we drill deeper into that data, one of the, for me, most startling aspects of the data was when we talked with white women. And it's important to note that in this study, we spoke with 500, almost 600 white women as well in terms of the survey. 91% felt like it was very important for us all to work together, meaning white women supporting and working in solidarity with women of color. But when we drilled into what was actually happening, only 9% were actively sponsoring women of color in their workplace. So 91% conceptually, great idea, but 9% in actuality. And so, 9 and 91 is there's a lot of opportunity. Let me put it that way. There's a lot of opportunity between 9 and 91.
Yeah, so when we look at the 9 versus 91, what do you believe contributes to that? Is it lack of knowing how to? Is it not wanting to? What did you find in your research?
Yeah, I think there are a lot of factors that contribute to why we, in concept want to, but in reality are not, right? And so I think some of it is just literally about the dynamics and logistics of the role. Women are not just serving in corporations, but they're also caretaking, and it's certainly, if we think about the last 2 years, homeschooling, caring for elderly parents or extended family members, there are a lot of demands on the day-to-day for women. When we drill into the reality of women of color, there's often a lot of pressure in the seat. So not only are you asked to do the job as it relates to the seat, but you're asked to represent the company. You're asked to be the face of the company. You're asked to mentor other upcoming women. You're asked to do all of these additional roles. Many women we found, not only do they have their sort of main roles, but they're sitting on DEI committees and doing other kinds of special initiatives because they're passionate about wanting to create those other opportunities. And those things also pull on their time and their energy and their effort. One of the less talked about things, though, which we also have to acknowledge, is that there's a way in which we are indoctrinated often when we come into these situations to believe that a gain for one is a loss for another. It's sort of this traditional paradigm of power and this zero-sum thinking that if I make a way for somebody else, that it in some way jeopardizes my opportunity. And if there's only one seat and I'm sitting in it, am I going to engage in efforts that are going to cause me to lose my seat? Well, we all know the answer to that question. And so we've not created room and spaces to have really honest conversations about the degree to which all women feel like we've not made the progress that we've wanted to make, and how all of us espouse to, with the best intentions, let me get mine and then I'll turn around. And what we're finding is that that is not an effective strategy for being able to move the needle. So we've got work to do.
You said it. We really do have work to do. So in the midst of all of these shifts, what does reimaging and really not panicking do for Black women and other women of color?
I think the opportunity of reimagining is really about the opportunity to take your power back. And we have a lot more power than we believe we do as women of color. And it begins with being willing to see our own value and to own the value of our lived experiences, our hard-earned wisdom, all of the other roles and capacities that we often operate in organizations, but are maybe never given the credit for. One of the biggest things we say at the top of the research is that we are your greatest underestimated resource, right? In other words, we are here, we have the capacity to lead and serve, and at a time when we believe corporate America is needing the unique set of skills and perspectives that women of color bring as we consider what it really means to develop and grow and build an inclusive workforce. So we've got to first, as women of color, recognize that we've got goods. And we've got to be willing to own and take responsibility for the fact that we have the goods. And then I think it becomes about creating spaces to have authentic and honest conversations about what is working in corporate cultures and what is not working in corporate cultures. The work that I think that corporate American leaders have to do who want to operate as co-conspirators or allies, as we say, is to be able to recognize that providing opportunities or creating room and space to support the leadership of women of color is going to be good for the corporation as a whole. And I think there's a mythology or a concern that by advancing women of color or people of color in any ecosystem, that somehow that means that it's going to be less for everybody else. That there, again, this sort of zero-sum thinking. And so we need to recognize that we have power. We need to recognize that we do have a vision for how corporations can be better, and that we have an opportunity to really show up in our full purpose and in our full contribution and in our full power to support this new vision and this new opportunity and era that I think not only corporations, but I wanted to say 21st century leadership has been due for reimagining. And certainly everything that we're seeing in terms of what's happening in Ukraine and other aspects of our world where old paradigm power is continuing to rear its head, we have an opportunity to reimagine what we think leadership needs to look like. And I think women of color have the opportunity to be at the forefront of that conversation and an opportunity to lead and facilitate those conversations to the betterment of us all.
Spitting straight knowledge. Thank you so much, Rha. I feel like knowing and owning that you've got the goods. I need that on a t-shirt. I need that on a poster. Can we get that? I love it. I love it. So could you tell us about your vision of work, not just as a transactional relationship for survival, but as a springboard for creative expression, financial freedom, and societal transformation?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like we've come out of, and there's sort of, questions about whether are we all the way out of the woods or not. And we all know that that has been the big dance that we've been engaged in. But certainly over the last 24 months, there's been a moment of reckoning for every single one of us, right? And a moment of reckoning for us, not only in the context of the roles and the spaces that we occupy, but just from the place of our humanity. And I think some of what we're seeing in the conversations that are happening, I know Adam Grant and all of his wisdom calls it the grand resignation. I like to call it the great renegotiation, because I actually think that people are starting to really sift and sort on behalf of their own purpose and calling and meaning and values and perspectives, and starting to really ask, can work for me? We're clear that work hasn't been working for so many of us, which is why we saw the mass exodus and have been experiencing the mass exodus over the last 24 months. But can work for me? And if work can work for me, what's important to be able to really integrate into the conversation? And so I do want to say that for women of color, we have an opportunity to be purpose-led. We have an opportunity to be visionary, and we have an opportunity to be vocal about our vision and about our perspective and about what it is that we want or need. And I think that traditionally, we often don't feel that we have the permission to do that. And so we do sort of suffer in silence in many, many instances where there could be an opportunity to actually, what I call, break that fourth wall and have very real conversations about how work could be restructured to work for us, and about the way that situations and circumstances might be reorchestrated to really create environments that are much more welcoming for the new ideas and perspectives. And so I think the way that we vision work and the way that we see the opportunity of work transforming is that all of voices are really at the table, that people can show up as their whole selves and still feel a sense of belonging. And I think that's the work that all of us have to do, regardless of what our role is or whatever identity it is that we stand in and occupy. That's our collective work as well as our individual work.
100%. And so, belonging really has a lot to do with values. So how do Black women and other women of color get clear on our values and then align our work to those values?
I think the first opportunity that may be groundbreaking for Black women and women of color in general is to consider the potential that we have the right to be happy. We have the right to be fulfilled. We have the right to be seen. We have the right to be heard. We have the right to be honored. And we have the right to actually orchestrate a life and a contribution of work that is in alignment with that possibility and that opportunity. So I do want to say that our happiness and our fulfillment is actually the revolution, because so many of us have been hardwired to believe that it is only about our survival and our capacity and our ability to take care of everyone else that makes us worthy. And that is not what makes us worthy, right? There's so many incredible qualities and attributes that we bring. And it's our opportunity to own that. It's our opportunity to stand in that unapologetically. Our values are rooted in the things that really matter to us. And I think as women of color, we don't often give ourselves the opportunity within the context of our own happiness to prioritize what really matters. When women ask me, well, how do I get in touch with my values? I often say to them, look at where you're maddest. Look at where you're the angriest. Look at where you're the most frustrated. Look at where you're the most fed up, as well as look at where you're the most inspired. And then draw on those 360 degrees of inspiration to get really, really clear about what is important to you and what matters. And so it could be as simple as you taking that question and going into a journal exercise or going into a meditation or sitting in nature and really allowing the truth to emerge. I think some of us have been afraid of our truth, Angel, and that's part of the reason why we don't really take the time and the space to sit, because understanding and unearthing our truth may require us to make some very hard choices about the nature of our life, the nature and the current state of our work. But if we're able to do that and we're willing to cultivate the courage as a practice, you all cultivate the courage, then I think a new reality is possible. When we are aligned with our values, we are in our full power. And I think even our opportunity to discover that power exists inside of us as much as it exists outside of us is also part of the new frontier.
Thank you so much. And I'm so curious, when it comes to you and your values, what do you value as an individual?
Yeah, I appreciate honesty. I appreciate integrity. I appreciate compassion and care. And I know that in the corporate workspace, in some cases, this may be new language. And I think that that's the other opportunity that we want to recognize. The work that we are being called to do right now requires new language, language that maybe traditionally has not been welcomed in corporate spaces. But those are the things that I value. And I do value true belonging. I do value generosity of spirit. And I say that I value it, but I also want to say that these are the values of nFormation, that this is part of the commitment that we're creating and we're inviting as we think about all of the people who can participate, not only in our member community, but who can work with us as co-conspirators to really change the game.
Thank you so much. And as those values led you to this work and ultimately, recently this report, I'm curious to hear how this report was, received from folks or who the audience was and how it helped them make those mental shifts.
So I think the report has been so incredibly well received, not only on behalf of women of color, but actually on corporations as well. I'm going to talk about women of color first, and then I'll go to our corporate co-conspirators and allies. So when the report dropped, we literally were flooded in our inboxes with women sharing their stories, women thanking us for speaking their truth on behalf of their own experience. And just even in the creating of the surveys and the salons and the conversations and the interviews, women thanked us at the end because they felt like they had not had a space, a safe space where they could really share about their experience. So I will say that the reception on their behalf was incredible from that perspective. I think in the context of corporate allies and co-conspirators, they recognize that they've got an opportunity to change and transform, but many of them have not really understood what the work is or known what have been the steps to take. And so a lot of what we've been hearing from corporations is like, we're on board, we get it. Now, how do we do that? Or thank you for being willing to give us a set of recommendations, because the report does include a set of recommendations, not only for corporations, but also for co-conspirators as well as our women of color. But there's been a deep appreciation for being willing to tell the truth, for being willing to tell it with love and compassion, and for being willing to be open to supporting corporations and being able to chart a new path forward.
I love that. We have a question from the audience. So they asked, what are the ways in which these corporations can help Black women face the challenges of job automation?
I think we are all dancing in the context of a new reality. And I think there are questions that we want to be asking specifically as it relates to what are the new skills that we're going to need to create for the new positions, because everything is not automatically going to go to automation. We are still going to need to have and stand our ground for the presence of human experience. And so I think one of the opportunities for women of color who are listening is to really think about their leadership skills and to think about, in addition to the technical skills that we carry, what are some of the additional skills, organizational building skills, team building skills, process building skills that we carry that are going to be vital? What is the unique perspective and point of view that we carry that are going to be vital? And so, when I started to talk earlier about recognizing that we've got the goods, we've got to begin to also look more holistically about the skills that we bring. I also think as we're in conversations with our corporations to ask what their plans are, what their visions are, and are there opportunities for us to be a part of that innovation? I was in a conversation with a leader yesterday, and one of the things that sort of kept bubbling up in the conversation was, we need to get beyond DEI. We say this in the report, we say this in our TED Talk, that we need to recognize and see that there are opportunities to lead in finance and engineering and marketing, and really start to lean into those additional and expanded roles as we think about our pathways to advancement.
Thank you so much. And we want to point out this report that we're referring to, it's actually, there's a link in the chat. So anyone that's asking questions around where I can find this report, it's all in the chat. There's also an audio version I saw as well, so you can have it, you can listen to it as well. So thank you so much. I want to shift gears a little bit as we close out. Could you tell us about your company nFormation and how its app is supporting female executives of color?
Yes, so nFormation is a vetted yet very welcoming member-based community committed to providing safe, brave, and new space for women of color. And it is for women of color, by women of color. And nFormation was birthed out of over 3.5 years of listening to well over 1,000 women about their specific, unique experiences in the world of work. One of the things that Deepa and I discovered as we were listening to all of these women was that as much as we thought the challenges that we were facing in the context of the workplace were individual, they are indeed systemic. And that our work is not only to, I don't even want to say not only, our work and our desire is not to teach women how to play the game, but our work is to help women reimagine power and success on their own terms, and then to work collectively to help change the game. And that is really the heart and soul of the work. And so we invite people to learn more about us. I'm sure that all the links will be provided. But yes, that is the commitment for the work. And I do want to say that we need a space where we can leverage our collective intelligence and wisdom and brilliance towards the things that we understand matter most. That we're in a very, very unique moment as women of color, where we are in demand, our leadership, our thoughts, our perspectives are in demand. And we want to make sure that we can meet this moment in a way that creates work environments where all people can thrive and prosper. That is the goal.
Love it, love it, love it. So the next question is a selfish question I have. What's next for you after you've just dropped this report on the world that has changed and shifted how so many of us see our colleagues, ourselves? What's next for you? What gets you excited about the work coming up?
So we are probably about a week and a half shy of announcing our next initiative, which is called 100 Women. And we are making a commitment to actually transform the way that placement happens. And over the next 3 years, we are committing to place 100 women of color in the C-suite or board. And so that is going to be the next initiative moving. And the thing that I'll share here is that, in our listening, and going deep in conversations with some of the major recruiters in our field, as well as going deep with all of the HR departments in particular communities and corporations who are really trying to do this different. We understand that placement needs to be completely reimagined. And right along behind it, we understand that retainment and advancement need to be reimagined. And so our intention through the 100 Women Initiative is completely to reimagine that and to offer the opportunity for corporate America to develop a whole new set of criteria that's actually rooted in the lived experiences and hard-earned wisdom and unique perspective that women of color bring, just by virtue of all of the ways in which we've done what we've done in order to be able to succeed.
Amazing. Well, Rha, it is always such a pleasure that Power to Fly is able to have these conversations with you. I want to close out by asking you to share how, those that are on this call can connect with you, where they can find you, all of your socials. Can you let us know?
Awesome. Thank you so much, Angela. It's my joy. So nFormation.com is the way to reach us. If you want to know more about the research, it's Pow Her, so POWHER, redefined.com, where you can download the report. We also have an upcoming event on March 15th. You'll learn more about that on the site. And we invite you to stay in touch with us at nFormation, both in the context of LinkedIn as well as Instagram. Thank you again for having me. It's been my joy to be here.
Yes, thank you so much. Passing it back over to Mariella.
Thank you so much, both of you. Rha Goddess, you are always a North Star to just look towards for inspiration and encouragement. And I applaud you for all the work that you're doing. Thank you so much for taking initiative, for sharing your voice. And I am a member of the nFormation community, and I can tell you that deep listening happens there, and it is just so, I don't even have a word to describe it. It's needed, and I'm grateful for that. So thank you, Rha Goddess, for all the work that you do.
Thank you so much, Mariella. It was my joy, my privilege. Thank you all.